Good evening, dear listeners, and welcome. Tonight, we bring you a chilling tale titled A Night to Remember. Prepare to be captivated as we delve into the heart of this poignant story. Please, Frank, stop it. You're hurting me. I beg you. Lily sobbed, her voice cracking under the weight of despair, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Frank, fueled by cheap whiskey and years of unchecked rage, continued his assault. He was an animal, a beast in man's clothing, oblivious to the pain he inflicted upon the woman he'd vowed to love and cherish. Each thrust was a testament to his cruelty. Lily's cries were drowned out by his grunts and the creaking of their old bed. When he was finally spent, she lay there, trembling and broken, while he passed out beside her in a drunken stupor. Lily rose slowly, every muscle screaming in protest. She found her daughter, Chloe, huddled in the corner of their cramped living room, clutching her teddy bear. "Mommy, is Daddy mad again?" Chloe's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with terror. Lily pulled her daughter close, holding her tight as she fought back her own tears. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here," she whispered, her words doing little to soothe either of their wounded hearts. Their life in this dilapidated trailer was a constant cycle of fear and despair, bound together by a loveless marriage and a child born out of obligation. Frank, a slave to his addiction, saw them both as burdens, obstacles in the path of his next drink. 8 years crawled by, each one an eternity. Lily toiled tirelessly at a local factory, hands calloused, her spirit worn. She was the sole breadwinner, bearing the weight of their meager existence on her slender shoulders. Yet Frank remained unchanged, parasite clinging to her meager earnings, squandering them on lottery tickets and cheap thrills. Whenever his pockets were empty, her love became his punching bag. And lately, his vile gaze had begun to linger on their daughter, his threats escalating with terrifying intensity. Tonight, the storm broke again. Frank, reeking of booze and desperation, cornered Lily by their rusty pickup truck, his eyes burning with a dangerous light. "Where is it, woman? Where's the money?" he roared, his voice thick with rage. Lily cradled Chloe protectively, her own body shielding her daughter from his blows. "Frank, please, I don't have any money left. Please, I'll get paid tomorrow, I promise. Just don't hurt us." Her words tumbled out, a desperate plea for mercy. "Don't you lie to me." Frank backhanded her, the blow cracking sharply against her cheek. His gaze then fell on Chloe, cruel smirk spreading across his face. "No money, huh? Fine. Then I guess the little princess can be more accommodating." "No, don't touch her. She's just a child. Please, hurt me instead. Just leave her alone," Lily screamed, her voice hoarse with terror. Frank kicked her hard, sending her sprawling onto the dirt. He grabbed Chloe roughly by the arm, his laughter echoing in the night like the howl of a demon. Chloe's cries were cut short as Frank dragged her into the trailer, slamming the door shut behind them. Lily lay there, helpless and broken, the bruises on her body a testament to her love and her despair. Lily lay there, her body racked with pain, blood oozing from a gash on her forehead. Chloe's screams pierced the night, each one a searing blade twisting in Lily's gut. She struggled to rise, to save her daughter, but her body wouldn't obey. Then silence, an eerie, chilling silence. Lily finally stumbled back into the trailer, her blood running cold. Frank lay sprawled on the floor, his eyes vacant, a pool of blood blooming around his head. A heavy cast-iron skillet lay abandoned nearby. And there was Chloe, standing frozen, her small hands still clutching the handle. It was an accident, she would later tell the police, her voice barely a whisper. He slipped and fell. The jury, however, saw a different story. They saw a man's life cut short, a young girl forever scarred. But they also saw Lily's years of suffering, the bruises on her body, a silent testimony to her husband's abuse. In the end, they found her guilty of manslaughter, but with extenuating circumstances. Her sentence was lenient, 5 years. Chloe went to live with Lily's mother, Susan. 10 years passed. Chloe blossomed into a bright, beautiful young woman, excelling in her studies and earning a scholarship to a prestigious university. Lily, released early for good behavior, tried to rebuild her life. She moved to Seattle, seeking anonymity in the bustling city. She found work as a waitress, keeping to herself, haunted by the ghosts of that terrible night. She dated occasionally, but never allowed herself to truly connect with anyone, passed a heavy chain around her neck. Then she met Ethan. He was a kind, gentle man, a carpenter with calloused hands and a warm smile that reached his kind eyes. They worked together at a soup kitchen, drawn together by their shared compassion for others. Ethan saw past her reserved demeanor, sensing the pain she held within. Slowly, tentatively, they began to build a friendship. Connection that deepened into something more. Lily, for the first time in years, felt a flicker of hope. And so, one rainy afternoon, sitting in his cozy workshop, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and hope, she decided to tell him everything. Ethan listened intently, his expression a mixture of shock and sorrow. When Lily finished, her story leaving her raw and vulnerable, he didn't recoil or judge. He simply reached for her hand, his touch conveying a depth of understanding words never could. "Lily, your past doesn't define you," said softly, his voice filled with compassion. "What matters is that you're a good person, a strong woman, and I..." Paused, gaze meeting hers. "I love you." Lily's heart soared. Ethan's love was a beacon, promise of a brighter future. They married the following spring, a simple ceremony filled with love and laughter. 2 years later, their family grew with the arrival of little Sophie, a bubbly, bright-eyed little girl who filled their lives with joy. Life wasn't always easy. Ethan worked long hours as a contractor to support his family, and Lily, haunted by the trauma of her past, struggled with the idea of having another child. Still, they were happy, their love a fortress against the storms of life. One Friday evening, Ethan came home early, bouquet of lilies in hand. It was their 5th anniversary. "For you, my love," said, handing her the flowers with a tender kiss. "Ethan, you shouldn't have. You work too hard already," Lily chided, her heart brimming with love for this man who cherished her so. "Come on, let's have dinner. I made your favorite." After dinner, with Sophie sound asleep in her room, Ethan and Lily found themselves drawn together. Their desire a familiar comfort. Intimacy, for them, was always a delicate dance, the careful navigation of Lily's past traumas. With limited space in their small apartment, they'd become quite adept at finding creative solutions. Tonight, they ended up on a blanket spread across their living room floor, soft music playing in the background. Ethan gently laid Lily down, his hands working slowly, reverently, remove her clothes. Lily mirrored his movements, her fingers trembling slightly as she unbuttoned his shirt. He showered her face, her neck, her shoulders with soft kisses, each touch a spark igniting a slow burn within her. Ethan was always patient, always tender, his lovemaking a balm to her wounded soul. He moved with a quiet strength that both excited and reassured her. They moved together, their bodies finding a familiar rhythm, their breaths mingling in the warm air. Their lovemaking was a testament to their bond, a fusion of passion and tenderness, a release from the anxieties that haunted their waking hours. Afterwards, as they lay entwined, Ethan gently stroked Lily's hair, his voice husky with contentment. "Lily, my parents are having their annual barbecue next week. I know we haven't been back in a while, but I'd love for you and Sophie to come with me. They really want to see you both." Lily tensed, her body instinctively retreating into itself. "Ethan, I don't know. Been so long. What if they ask about..." Her voice trailed off, unable to voice the fears that clawed at her. Ethan understood. He knew about her past, about the whispers that followed her like shadows. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. They know what happened, and they love you. Besides, Sophie deserves to know her grandparents better." Lily hesitated, heart torn. She'd told Ethan about her family, about Susan and the life she'd left behind. Ethan's family knew about her past too, but still, the thought of returning to that small, stifling town filled her with dread. But Ethan was right. Sophie adored her grandparents, and she deserved a chance to know them better, free from the weight of Lily's past. "Okay," Lily finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "We'll go." That Saturday, they packed up Ethan's beat-up Ford pickup and set off. Lily secured Sophie in her car seat, her gaze lingering on the passing scenery. The familiar landscape of rural Oregon, with its rolling hills and endless fields, filled her with a strange mix of dread and nostalgia. It wasn't their first trip back to Ethan's hometown, but the usual pit in Lily's stomach felt tighter than usual. They reached the Willamette River just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Ferry crossing was backed up, a line of cars stretching out before them. As they finally reached the other side, Twilight had deepened into night. Ethan flipped on the headlights, illuminating the winding country road ahead. It all happened so fast. 1 minute, the road was empty. The next, headlights were bearing down on them. Ethan swerved, but it was too late. The roar of metal colliding with metal ripped through the night, followed by an explosion of shattered glass and crunching steel. Then, darkness. Lily woke to the harsh beep of a heart monitor and the sterile smell of antiseptic. Her head throbbed and her vision swam. She tried to sit up, but a searing pain shot through her leg, forcing her back against the pillows. "Ethan? Sophie?" she croaked, her throat parched. Where were they? What had happened? A woman in a blue scrubs approached, her expression kind but grave. "Lily, I'm Dr. Lewis. You're at St. Joseph's Hospital. You were in a car accident. Do you remember anything?" Lily shook her head, her mind a jumbled mess of fragmented images and pain. "My husband, my daughter, are they?" Her voice broke, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Lewis took her hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Lily, I'm so sorry, but your husband and daughter, they didn't survive the crash. I'm so very sorry. They're lost." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A sob escaped Lily's lips, primal scream of anguish and disbelief. Then darkness swallowed her whole. When Lily regained consciousness, it was 3 days later. A woman with tired eyes and worry lines etched deeply into her face sat beside her. "Lily, honey, you're awake. Thank God," the woman sobbed, clutching Lily's hand. Lily stared at her, confused and disoriented. The woman's words seemed garbled, her touch unfamiliar. The woman rushed out, returning moments later with a doctor. "Lily, do you remember what happened?" the doctor asked gently, examining her chart. Lily shook her head, a wave of dizziness washing over her. "My head, it hurts. I don't remember. Do you know how old you are? What year it is?" Lily stared back blankly. The doctor sighed, a look of sympathy in his eyes. "Lily, you appear to be suffering from post-traumatic amnesia. It's not uncommon after a severe head injury. You may have some memory loss, some confusion, could be temporary, or—" He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. The woman, Lily's mother Susan, they told her, stayed by her side throughout her recovery. But no matter how many times Susan spoke of Ethan and Sophie, their faces remained frustratingly absent from Lily's memory. It was as if a vital part of her had been erased, leaving a gaping hole in its place. Lily was released into Susan's care. A wheelchair carried her into the small chapel where Ethan and Sophie's funeral was being held. As she was wheeled down the aisle, she saw them. Ethan's parents, their faces etched with grief. Ethan's mother, a large woman with a commanding presence, lunged at Lily, her voice raw with anguish. You have the nerve to show your face here? Look what you've done. You took my son, my granddaughter. You're cursed. No, let her go, please," Susan cried, rushing to Lily's defense. "She doesn't understand. She's sick. Please have mercy on her. I'll take her away. She won't ever bother you again." Ethan's father, his face pale and drawn, gently pulled his wife away, his own sorrow palpable. He looked at Lily, then at Susan, his voice weary. "Go, take care of her, and please, don't come back." Whispers followed them out of the chapel, chorus of judgment and condemnation. Lily caught snippets of their harsh whispers. Cursed, bad luck, killed her own family. Ethan's mother stood on the steps, her face a mask of fury and grief, feeding the flames of their scorn. Susan shielded Lily as best she could, pushing her wheelchair through the throng of mourners and back to their waiting car. As they drove away, Susan vowed never to return to that town. Now, to those people who had shown her daughter nothing but cruelty. Ethan's father slipped Susan some money before they left, enough to help them get back on their feet. He'd wanted Lily to stay with them, he confessed, but he knew it would be too painful, too raw. Everyone. And so, Lily and Susan vanished from their lives. Promise kept, a chapter closed. A year passed. Lily's physical wounds healed, but her mind remained fractured. She spoke in disjointed sentences, her laughter childlike and unpredictable. She was like a puzzle with missing pieces, a melody forever out of tune. Susan, her heart breaking for her daughter, tried desperately to piece together the fragments of Lily's past, but it was no use. The doctors held out little hope for a full recovery. Lily's amnesia, they explained, might be permanent. Susan accepted her daughter's condition with a heavy heart, her love for Lily the only constant in their uncertain world. They moved to a small town in rural Idaho, seeking solace in its quiet anonymity. Lily, with the innocence of a child, found joy in simple things: collecting wildflowers, chasing butterflies, spending hours by the river, lost in her own world. Lily, though childlike in her demeanor, possessed a lingering beauty, a delicate loveliness that drew stares and whispers wherever she went. Some looked at her with pity, others with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. But there were those, men with darkness in their hearts, who saw her vulnerability as an invitation. They'd leer at her, whispering lewd comments as she walked past, their gazes making her skin crawl. Susan did her best to protect Lily, to shield her from their predatory stares, but fear had become a constant companion, casting a long shadow over their lives. One sun-drenched afternoon, Lily was helping Susan tend to their small vegetable garden behind their farmhouse. As Susan went inside for a glass of lemonade, Lily wandered to the edge of the property, drawn by the sight of wildflowers blooming by the creek. She didn't notice the man watching her from the cover of the nearby woods. He'd seen her around town, heard the whispers, knew about her fragile mind. He'd been watching her for weeks, his desire growing with each passing day. He approached her casually, a charming smile masking his predatory intent. Lily, ever trusting, beamed back at him, her smile as bright and unguarded as a child's. "Hey there, little lady, you got a name?" he drawled, taking a step closer. "Lily," she chirped, picking a daisy and twirling it between her fingers. "That's a pretty name for a pretty lady. Say, Lily, you wouldn't happen to have a piece of candy on you, would you? I sure am craving something sweet." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. Lily giggled, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath his touch. "No candy, but I'll share my flowers with you. They're pretty, aren't they?" She held out the daisy, her eyes shining with innocent generosity. "That's mighty kind of you, Lily," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "But you know what's even sweeter than candy? A kiss from a pretty lady like you." He leaned in, his breath hot and fetid on her cheek. Lily stiffened, a flicker of fear momentarily clouding her eyes. "No, you shouldn't do that," she whispered, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Mommy says strangers are bad." Now, there's no need to be scared of me," Lily crooned, his grip tightening on her arm. "When someone touches you like this, it just means they like you. Understand?" Lily's eyes welled up, her lower lip trembling. I want to go home now." "Not so fast, sweetheart. The fun's just beginning." But I don't like this. Let me go." Lily whimpered, her instincts screaming at her to run. He ignored her pleas, shoving her roughly to the ground. She landed hard, the air knocked out of her lungs. He pinned her down, his weight suffocating, his rancid breath filling her nostrils. Lily thrashed against him, but he was too strong. He used his belt to tie her wrists together, his touch rough, his laughter cruel. Lily whimpered as he tore at her clothes, his eyes gleaming with a terrifying mix of lust and malice. "Now, this is what you call a real man, sweetheart. Not like those other losers you've been with." He ran a calloused hand down her cheek, his touch sending a shiver of revulsion through her. Lily bit down hard on his hand, drawing blood. He roared in pain, slapping her hard across the face. "You little bitch, you're gonna like it whether you want to or not." He grabbed her throat, his grip tightening. "Scream all you want. Ain't nobody gonna hear you out here. And even if they did, who'd believe a crazy woman like you anyway?" He ripped open her shirt, his hands roaming over her body like a spider, leaving a trail of fear and disgust in their wake. Lily thrashed and bucked, but it was no use. His weight bore down on her, suffocating her. The memory of Frank's violence, terror of that night, flooding back with nightmarish clarity. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face, her whimpers turning into sobs of despair. He continued his assault, his cruelty fueled by her fear and helplessness. Lily drifted in and out of consciousness, her body numb, her mind trapped in a horrific replay of her past traumas. Finally, he was spent, his lust sated, leaving her broken and violated on the muddy ground. "Remember, you don't tell anyone about this, you hear?" He snarled, pulling up his pants. "Nobody's gonna believe a crazy woman. They'll probably lock you up for good. You understand?" Gave her one last menacing look before disappearing into the woods. Lily lay there for what felt like an eternity, her body trembling, her mind reeling. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the field. Finally, she found the strength to sit up, Her clothes torn and soiled, her spirit shattered. She stumbled back towards the house, the image of her attacker seared into her memory. Susan, her face etched with worry, met her at the porch steps. "Lily, honey, where have you been? I was getting worried. You missed dinner." She stopped short, her gaze falling on Lily's disheveled appearance. "Lily, what happened? What's wrong?" Lily looked at her mother, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. The words, the memories of what had just transpired, were a tangled mess in her wounded mind, impossible to articulate. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Susan, her heart breaking at the sight of her daughter's distress, pulled her close. "Shh, it's okay, honey. I'm here now. Mommy's here." But even as Susan comforted her, a chilling realization dawned on Lily. He was right. Who would believe her? Who would believe a woman with a broken mind, a woman haunted by the ghosts of her past? And so she retreated further into herself, her secret a heavy burden, festering wound in the depths of her soul. The man who'd violated Lily, a local named Randy, had a reputation. He was a leering, predatory presence in their small town. A man who saw women as objects, their consent irrelevant. He'd been married to Brenda for over 20 years, their marriage an open secret of infidelity and abuse. Randy bragged about his conquests at the local bar, his words slurred by cheap beer and a lifetime of entitlement. The other men, implicit in their silence, laughed along, their gazes lingering a little too long on the women around them. Even Brenda, worn down by years of his philandering and cruelty, couldn't escape the whispers, the knowing glances, followed her like a curse. She'd confronted him countless times, threatened to leave, even chased him off with a butcher knife once, but he always came crawling back, his apologies as empty as his promises. Brenda, bound to him by fear, by a warped sense of loyalty, by the 2 children they shared, always took him back. Randy, used to getting away with his actions, saw Lily as easy prey, a vulnerable woman, her mind fragile, her innocence a beacon in the darkness of his desires. He'd been watching her, his hunger growing with each passing day. And after that first encounter, he felt even more emboldened. Her silence a twisted form of consent in his twisted mind. Susan, terrified for Lily's safety, tried to keep her close, her heart heavy with a mother's fear. But Lily, restless and confused, longed for the familiar routine of her days, the simple comfort of tending to their small herd of sheep in the meadow. Unable to bear the thought of her daughter confined within their small home, Susan reluctantly agreed. So Lily returned to her routine, her childlike mind seemingly unaffected by the trauma that haunted her mother's waking hours. Oblivious to the danger that lurked in the shadows, she skipped through the tall grass, her laughter carried on the breeze, unaware of the hungry eyes that followed her every move. Randy, where the hell are you? What are you doing, sleeping in? We gotta go." Brenda's shrill voice pierced through the thin walls of their farmhouse. Randy groaned, burying his head under the pillow. Head pounded, symphony of regret and cheap whiskey. He vaguely remembered a brawl at the bar last night, a shouting match with Brenda. "Get your lazy ass out of bed. It's Old Man Thompson's memorial. You think you're too good to pay your respects? And don't forget, you promised you'd help set up the tents." Brenda continued, her voice rising in exasperation. All right, I'm coming," Randy grumbled, reluctantly dragging himself out of bed. "And try not to get falling down drunk today, will you? Some of us have to work tomorrow." Brenda muttered, already on her way out the door. Yeah, whatever you say," Randy mumbled under his breath. He threw on some clothes, grabbed a beer to chase away the remnants of last night's hangover, and headed out the door. He found Brenda already hitched their trailer to their beat-up pickup truck. The memorial was a somber affair, the air thick with grief and the smell of barbecue. Randy, true to his nature, couldn't resist indulging in the free-flowing beer, his gaze wandering over the mourners, his thoughts straying to less honorable pursuits. He hadn't been at the memorial long before the whispers started again. They followed him like a shadow, constant reminder of his transgressions. The men, their faces a mix of pity and disdain, avoided his gaze. The women, their eyes cold and knowing, steered clear, clutching their children close as he passed. He found himself at the beer cooler, trying to drown out the whispers with another can of cheap beer, when he overheard a group of men talking nearby. "Did you hear about Susan's daughter?" The one who moved in with her a while back? Yeah, the quiet one. Heard she's touched in the head. Something bad happened to her, they say. Something about a car crash, or maybe it was her husband. Anyway, she ain't right in the head no more. Sad, really. She's a looker, though, that Lily. Randy's ears perked up at the mention of Lily's name. He drained his beer, his gaze drifting towards the tree line at the edge of the property, picturing Lily's innocent face, her gentle touch, the memory igniting a familiar spark of desire. He stumbled out of the tent, muttering an excuse to Brenda about needing some fresh air. He walked towards the woods, his pace quickening, his thoughts turning dark and predatory. He could hear children's laughter echoing from the nearby meadow, their voices carried on the breeze. He knew exactly who he'd find there. The memory of that first encounter, of Lily's vulnerability, of the power he'd felt over her, surged through him. The beer buzzed in his veins, fueling his desire, silencing the last vestiges of his conscience. He didn't care that she was vulnerable, that her mind was a fragile thing, easily broken. He only cared about possessing her, about claiming her as his own. Lily, oblivious to the danger closing in, continued her carefree walk back towards their farm. Humming softly to herself, Randy waited in the cover of the trees, his heart pounding with anticipation, his breath catching in his throat. As she drew closer, he lunged, his hand clamping down over her mouth before she could scream. Lily struggled against him, her eyes wide with terror, but his grip was too strong. He dragged her into the trees, his laughter echoing behind them, a chilling counterpoint to the terrified bleating of the sheep in the nearby pasture. "Gonna shut you up real good this time, sweetheart," he growled, shoving her roughly against the rough bark of a tree. He pinned her there, his weight crushing the air from her lungs, his hand still clamped tightly over her mouth. She tasted dirt and fear, her body trembling with a primal instinct to flee. He ripped at her clothes, his touch rough, his kisses bruising, his desire a violation. As he fumbled with his belt, his attention momentarily diverted, Lily saw her chance. She sank her teeth into his arm, biting down with all her might. He howled in pain, shoving her away, his hand flying to his bleeding arm. Lily scrambled back, clothes torn, her body exposed, her mind flooded with terror. She ran blindly, her bare feet pounding against the dirt road, her cries for help lost in the wind. Brenda and her friend Carol were walking back from a neighbor's wedding reception, their laughter echoing in the twilight, when they spotted Lily running towards them. Lily's clothes were torn, her hair disheveled, her eyes wide with terror. She ran straight into Susan's arms, her body trembling, her sobs racking her small frame. "Mommy, Mommy, he's back! The bad man! In the woods! He hurt me, Mommy!" "Lily, honey, what are you talking about? Who hurt you?" Susan asked, her voice filled with alarm, gently stroking her daughter's hair. Lily pointed towards the tree line, her words incoherent, her body shaking uncontrollably. Carol, her eyes narrowed, followed Lily's gaze, her hand instinctively resting on the small pocket knife she always carried with her. "Who, Lily? Who was it?" Carol's voice was calm, steady, but her eyes glinted with a dangerous light. Lily, her breath hitching in her chest, could only manage a single word. "Randy." "The hell are you talking about, Lily? What did Randy do?" Brenda's brow furrowed, her mind struggling to process her daughter's fragmented words. Lily, her breathing shallow and erratic, pointed towards the trees once more. Carol, sensing the urgency in Lily's gestures, wasted no time in following her gaze. She spotted a figure moving in the shadows, attempting to melt back into the trees. She recognized him instantly. Randy, clothes askew, his face flushed, a smear of blood staining his shirt collar. Carol marched towards him, her pace brisk, her hand gripping the pocket knife in her pocket. Randy was clutching his arm, his face contorted in pain, muttering curses under his breath. He'd been so preoccupied with stemming the bleeding, escaping before anyone noticed his absence, that he didn't even see her coming. Well, look what we have here." Carol's voice was cold, devoid of its usual warmth. Randy looked up, his eyes widening as he recognized the steely glint in her eyes. What are you doing here, Carol? This ain't none of your business." He stammered, his voice laced with a nervous tremor. You think this is funny, Randy? Think you can just go around hurting people and get away with it? Susan's been nothing but kind to you and Brenda, and this is how you repay her? By taking advantage of her daughter? Carol's voice dripped with disgust, her hand tightening around the handle of her knife. Look, it's not what you think. Randy pleaded, his voice cracking. She came on to me, said she wanted it. I didn't force her or nothing. Carol's laughter was sharp, humorless. You really think we're that stupid, Randy? You think anyone in their right mind would believe that for a second? Brenda, her face pale, finally reached them, her eyes darting between her husband and her friend, pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. She saw Lily, her clothes torn, her eyes filled with a terror she recognized all too well. You did this, didn't you? Brenda's voice was eerily calm, the quiet before a storm. Randy opened his mouth to speak, to offer up another lie, another excuse, but the words died in his throat. Brenda's eyes, usually filled with warmth and kindness, now burned with a cold fury that chilled him to the bone. She lunged, her attack swift and brutal. He screamed, a high-pitched, strangled sound that echoed through the trees as she brought the knife down. The authorities were called. Randy, his reign of terror finally at an end, was arrested and charged with assault. He'd spend the rest of his days paying for his crimes, his body a constant reminder of the night he'd crossed Brenda and the women of their town, the last time. Lily, her mind still trapped in its fragile state, never fully grasped the extent of Randy's punishment. The attack, a dark shadow in her fractured memory, haunted her nights, filling them with a nameless dread. Susan, her heart heavy with a mother's love and sorrow, kept her daughter close, her love a shield against the harsh realities of their world. Lily, forever innocent, found solace in her mother's arms, her laughter a bittersweet melody in their quiet, rural life. And that, dear listeners, concludes our tale. A story of darkness and despair, but also a testament to the enduring strength of love and the unwavering bond between a mother and her daughter. Until next time, may your nights be filled with peace and your days with hope.